Morning, guys.
Morning.
The other big story this Wednesday morning is, of course, Prince Harry.
Yeah.
Because 20 years ago, he founded his, I guess, his baby, really, a charity in his late mother's memory, helping African orphans. Now he's quit as the Watchdogs Circle. So I suppose the big question is, did he jump or was he pushed?
Well, the whole charity appears to be in danger of imploding.
This is sent to Bali.
Yeah, in Lesotho. He set it up with the Prince
Ciso of Lesotho.
Ciso of Lesotho. Both in honour of their mothers, to help people with AIDS, HIV. Big problems still in Africa is AIDS and HIV. 20 years on, they're quitting because they've fallen out. There's great infighting. It appears to centre around the new chairman of the charity, who's a Zimbabwean-born lawyer, who appears to want to move a lot of the fundraising work to southern Africa. And it's quite significant. The chief executive of the charity resigned, I think, November, December last year, based in London. So is this a clash of cultures here? Is this a charity doing great work in Africa, which appear to be being run by white men and women in Britain and perhaps America? And this chairman, who's a black lawyer, chairwoman, wanted, it appears from what I can interpret, much more of it done in Africa, probably, I would say, by Africans.
As it's Harry's charity in the sense that he founded it, why doesn't he have the clout to basically say, no, we do it my way?
Well, the trustees, because she's obviously not going, the trustees have gone in sympathy with him, and because she was appearing to sue the charity to get her way because they weren't willing to go along with it. So they were trying to get her out. She's suing, and I think they've decided the graceful way is to step back before the charity suffers any more damage.
I think trustees went, and now he's gone.
Exactly. But I think we'll find he set it up, then he got other people to do the work. Look, it's a cause close to his heart. After because he was his mother.
Yeah, and he was there last year, and he hosted a big fundraiser in New York.
So he's sincere
recently.
about his charity.
He's sincere, but there'll be other people doing the work, which is why he can't just snap his fingers and say, right, you're out, you must do this. But the UK Charity Commission, which is the watchdog on charities, is investigating allegations over the governance and how it's run. But I would have thought it was a good idea to run it on the ground, although I can see his link will have really helped fundraising, his profile. However, he's changed. I know you don't like him on most things, but he is still Prince Harry, and that would have pulled in.
The Royals are very good
cash.
at raising money for charity. But isn't it interesting, their last big fundraiser was in the United States, and Harry was there, of course. You can just sense that the new chairman of this organisation, chairwoman, wants it to be a much more in Africa, for Africa, because it's about helping people who've got a hard time in Africa.
I looked at that picture on the front of the Times, and it's laudable, but that does look a bit white saviour. You know, the white person riding in.
Yeah, but he can't help being white.
But it's
no. But I could see if other people are involved in the charity in Africa, they're thinking, well, can't we better direct the work we do on the ground rather than running it from another continent?
His royal connections has brought the millions into that charity in the first place. Don't forget that. I can remember years ago writing about how Michael Ashcroft, Lord Ashcroft, who's a former Tory deputy chairman, he'd given lots of money to this charity. So Harry, royals still can enable. And that's why they need
What does this mean for Harry on a personal level? Because, in a sense, we all know that he's struggling to find a role. You know, what is he for? What is Prince Harry for? That was one of the things that he was for. Now he's lost that completely. He's walked away from it. He feels he's had to. He's just got a lot more time to twiddle his thumbs in California, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, he can support his wife, who's apparently going to be a billionaire.
He's got the Invictus Games.
So I read.
He's still
which is for disabled, wounded, maimed service personnel around the world.
Coming to Britain, I think, next year.
I mean, that is a good project, but I suspect it is bringing up his kids, making money. He's got some mental health work still, which, but quite how effective he is another issue. But no,
the statement issued by the chairman, Dr. Chanduka, which has been issued, is absolutely devastating. Just to point out, she doesn't mention anyone by name, in which case it kind of casts a shadow over everybody. There are people in this world who behave as though they are above the law and mistreat people, and then play the victim card and use the very press they disdain to harm people who have the courage to challenge their conduct. Discerning readers will ask themselves, why would the chair of the board report her own trustees to the Charity Commission? Why would the High Court of England and Wales accept her application to hear the matter at all if the case had no merit? Well, because beneath all the victim narrative and fiction that has been syndicated to press is the story of a woman who dared to blow the whistle about issues of poor governance, weak executive management, abuse of power, bullying, harassment, misogyny, misogynoir, which is harassment and bullying of black women, and the cover-up that ensued. I will not be intimidated. For me, this is not a vanity project from which I can resign when I'm called to account. I'm an African who has had the privilege of a world-class education and career. I will not be intimidated.
How?
Doesn't seem much chance of compromise there. I mean, that's devastating.
Absolutely.
And talking about people with disdain of the press, well, we know somebody who's got a huge, deep-seated disdain for the press, Prince Harry.
This is going to make
victim narrative.
This is going to make his fallout, Harry's fallout with his brother and his dad, look like a picnic in the Buckingham Palace garden party.
Quite
that
clear
is
who she's getting at.
uncompromising.
And that's why Harry's had to go.
Where will this go next?
The courts.
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 And the courts, you have absolute privilege. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, and think of all the money that people have raised for that charity that's now going to be spent in huge, expensive court cases, which will cost millions.
Well, especially as a huge number of these issues that the chairwoman, Dr. Chanduka, references are issues that Harry and Meghan themselves have campaigned on. And, you know, it's just, it blows you away, that statement, doesn't it?
Privilege, disdain, all words that you can use about...
Abuse of power,
we know
harassment...
We know he's included in a lot of that, because we just know that that'd be the press. That's clearly him with his battle with the press and his high-profile legal action against the Mirror of the Sun and also the Mail.
There is an irony, isn't there, that this is in the written press in Britain, which he hates.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Listen, about a year ago, most commentators certainly, were in general agreement that we were probably looking at having an assisted dying bill on the statute books within a year or so. Now it would seem that it's been kicked into the long grass. There's not going to be any kind of decision about it for really the foreseeable.
No, the idea is to get it on the statute book, but then it doesn't become operational until as late as 2029 rather than 2027. Because the NHS says it'll take them time to get people trained and being able to handle cases of people coming in. But then, if you get it onto the statute book, if you do, it's not guaranteed. There was a 55 MP majority when it was in the House of Commons. You only need 28 to switch sides, and it would fail. But if you do get it on, and it's 2029, which is said to be the backstop, could be before then, but if it's 2029, that runs into a likely general election. Then does it become an issue in a general election with people campaigning on it, and then it never happens?
No.
But what an irony, though. This is England and Wales, when the Isle of Man yesterday approved it.
12 months.
Within 12 months of your death rather than 6 months.
Terminal diagnosis.
Yeah, but you can't just pop off to the Isle of Man. You have to have lived there for 5 years. So you can still go to Dignitas in Switzerland, but you may, in England and Wales, Scotland are looking at their own changes. You may not be able to do anything until 2029 if you're dying in absolute agony, terminally ill.
I've always thought this was too rushed. This is such a major change. It's on the par with changing the abortion rules back in '67. It's a massive, seismic change, and I just think they were rushing it.
But there's been a debate for decades.
But they've also been moving the goalposts. Safeguards that were there originally when this was debated
have been signed off by a High Court judge.
Gone.
But of course, we know in the court system, trying to get enough High Court judges free to make these kind of very sensitive decisions was going to be impossible.
But that was a hugely important safeguard.
So they got rid of that.
Who voted for that in the first place.
Then there was going to be a 3-person panel.
Yeah, that's still there. That's a Casey, prominent former judge, plus a social worker and a psychiatrist who can better assess whether you've been bullied into it.
But there wasn't even psychiatrists going to be involved at one stage in this.
That's right.
Kim Leadbeater has moved the goalpost, and it's causing a lot of that's the MP whose backbench bill it is.
Yes, it's her bill.
And it's caused a lot of concern by people who were wavering. And this won't help.
Well, it's been reported this morning that Leadbeater has climbed down because civil servants basically got hold of her and said, this is unworkable. Yeah. We cannot get this on the statute book in its present form. It needs to go back. She has
backed off. There's no doubt of that, because she wanted 2027, but Wes Street and the Health Secretary of the department are saying we won't be able to get a service up and running. Either publicly run or contracted with voluntary groups.
Yeah, he opposes the assisted dying.
As does the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood.
What you see all the way through is people who just oppose it in principle because they believe it is wrong, which is a perfectly legitimate position to have. Often it's faith-based, perfectly legitimate, but they keep raising practical objections when in fact really they're just starting from a point you don't want it. They're just looking for any stick to beat her and it with.
Meanwhile, finally we've come to the spring statement day. So we find out today what
mini budget in all but name.
Yeah, Rachel Reeves will actually cut and how much she will cut things. And of course we had this explosive sort of bit of information come out last night. Anushka Asana, who is Deputy Political Editor at ITV News, says that the OBR, this is the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is the watchdog which looks at the figures and looks at the books and tells the Chancellor whether her figures all add up. Well, it says, actually, that £5 billion she thought she was going to get from her cuts to welfare only add up to £3.4 billion. Now, I understand this is because the OBR thinks that when PIP assessments are made by assessors will be a little bit more lenient than she thought they might be. So she's got to find a huge amount of extra cuts.
And remember, this OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, is independent, and when she was Shadow Chancellor, she revered it.
Yes.
Because it often pulled the Tory government's figures apart.
Right.
And she revered it. And so, but if you heard Labour sources last night saying, no, the OBR have got it wrong, they're too gloomy, they're too pessimistic, you can't have it both ways.
Well, I've heard you attack it before in its forecasts.
I'm pointing out
No, I've just heard you. But nevertheless,
her position.
Nevertheless, it's what we have.
Yes.
And its figures are, you have to take them. You can't just pick and choose. Now, of course, it just exposes how the cuts were all about saving money. They weren't really about changing welfare for the better.
About getting people back into work, which is what it should be about.
Now, the proposal, if all the reports are correct today, is she'll look for another £500 million worth of savings. And she will do that by freezing, if the reports are correct, till 2030, new claimants, the incapacity benefit element of universal credit. That's the bit if you're unwell or disabled and you can't work, and claw back a few other things. There's going to be, again, one hell of a round. Now, the cuts are popular with some people who think the system is too soft and have been calling for it to be even tougher and the cuts to be deeper. The Daily Mail's done that. The Conservative Party do that. But she will have a backlash from a lot of Labour MPs, but also disabled groups who worry that people who just cannot work will be punished and be made poorer. And the impact assessment will be published. And if that impact assessment shows that people will be pushed into poverty as a result of that. That's not what Labour was elected to do. It was to reduce poverty, not
a lot of Labour MPs and a lot of Labour frontbenchers and backbenchers across the spectrum must be waking up each morning now thinking, well, what are we for? What is the Labour Party for? What does it stand for?
Because when you consider all the... there wasn't any optimism, in my view. There was far too much talking the economy down when they got in, all going on about black hole and all that stuff. It depressed demand, morale was low. But for a Labour government in its first year to be considering swinging cuts in disability money...
Kevin, your front page this morning, Daily Mirror, my mission. The Chancellor of a Labour government says that her mission is defence. Now, when people voted for a Labour government, I imagine that they probably voted for a Labour government that would look after people, because that is traditionally the kind of mission of a Labour government. The Labour Party coming into power, said their mission was growth. They were going to boost the economy. And therefore, business thought, oh, OK, perhaps we'll get a boost. Then she puts up national insurance for employers and the minimum wage, right, which business said...
Minimum wage is good, that's looking after people.
That is looking after people, but she said her mission was growth, and business said that's not going to boost growth. Yeah. And now she says her mission is defence, and we've got this huge boost in defence spending and backing for Ukraine. People are already getting in touch with us this morning. Deborah, we're sending billions to Ukraine and we need to cut our own benefits. Wendy, I feel so angry towards our government. Once again, it's the vulnerable being attacked. Ian, Rachel Reeves, the grim reaper of the sick, vulnerable and disabled.
That extra defence money isn't going to Ukraine. That is being spent in the UK. So
but it's in the wake of what's happening in Ukraine and the threat from Russia.
Yes, but it's the threat from Donald Trump, actually. That is why we have increased defence spending.
The Labour government is not going to say it's because of the threat
No, it's not,
from Donald Trump. That's your interpretation.
No, but it's a fact.
Right.
Because
we have to stand on our own.
Putin invaded 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago. That's not changed. What's changed is in the White House. That is why they've decided...
I don't think as a Labour man, what should be...
Look, I'm not a member of any political party.
Labour supporter.
Yeah.
No, and I voted for 6 different parties and
You're a Labour man.
in all elections.
You're a Labour man.
But I think a Labour government is better for the UK. The national insurance increase...
What should its mission be?
Well, it's to make life better.
Right.
That is what it is. Now,
when do people start feeling better?
They will... Well, actually, living standards are rising at the moment because wages are outstripping prices. They have consistently for a while.
I don't know if you've looked at your bills recently, Kevin, but, I mean, for instance, Thames Water, bills coming through have gone up massively.
I pay my bills.
I
pay my council tax. I pay my water. I have my power.
I don't think people feel like their wages are outstripping...
But
energy bills. Do you remember they say...
They are.
This government said they were going to cut energy bills by £300 a year.
Believe me,
going up
they are.
More than £300 every year. And here's the thing that I think says a lot about the priorities of the Prime Minister. There will be a huge fallout politically from what happens today. Many Labour MPs unhappy, many charity groups unhappy. Where will the Prime Minister be? Off he goes to Paris to talk about his coalition of the willing with Macron, when it's quite clear from that leaked conversation from the White House that they regard Europe as irrelevant.
I think...
What was the expression? How will we dismiss the Europe leaders?
Freeloaders.
Pain in the neck.
Pain in the neck, freeloader. And he's going to go over there whittering on with his mate Macron. Why doesn't he talk to his mate Macron about sorting out the small boats rather than some pie-in-the-sky stuff about sending our troops to Ukraine? He's got all his priority wrongs, this Prime Minister.
All his priorities wrong. What about improving the NHS? But is that wrong?
He should be...
Better rights at work? Is that wrong? Raising the minimum wage? Is that wrong? Putting up pensions by more than inflation? Is that wrong?
Are you going to just talk over me? You just talk over me because you're in the wrong.
Because you miss everything.
When Kevin's in the wrong,
you're so one-eyed. You're so one-eyed.
Should we have some sympathy for this Labour government in the sense that the defence crisis and the reality, as you say, and the need to spend more on defence is sort of like the COVID outbreak was for the Tories. It just knocked them right off course. There was nothing they could do but deal with it. And the situation, the international situation that we're in now with America pulling back, there's nothing much more we can do except increase spending on defence. And that's something which is beyond the control of the Labour
But we already spend considerably more than the NATO target. We're already the 6th biggest spender in the world in cash terms. What do we do? We want to deter and defend.
Because America
may
no longer be picking up the slack for us. That's
we're not going to be invaded.
Your mate wants to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. How much is that going to cost?
As I've said,
how much support is there for that?
I've said many times ago.
He should be back here sorting out the fallout from this.
Now, speaking of America, are we to trust American security anymore in terms of leaks? We've got this extraordinary story which rumbles on that the high echelons of the Washington government are talking about deeply, deeply secret matters of bombing raids on the Houthis on their mobile phones and on websites and internet connections which are not secure. And we know that a journalist was leaked. Absolutely grade A.
No, not leaked. Added to the group. Added to the chat.
Complete with thumbs-up emojis.
Can we trust them with our secrets?
Well, that is the most staggering, jaw-dropping leak, frankly. I can't recall anything like it.
No, I can't. And And no, you can't, but they won't want to say it.
No.
Because they
won't admit it.
It's amateur hour with a bunch of clowns. Now, Trump in his first term was accused of giving secrets to the Russian ambassador. He was also found to have taken really top-secret documents home about nuclear weapons and kept them in Mar-a-Lago after he was at the White House, which you're not allowed to do. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, the Foreign Secretary, she used a private email account. Shouldn't have done it. There was nothing of this quality on it when there was an investigation. It cost her the election, and Trump won. Was that
what led to Trump saying, lock her up?
Lock her, exactly, Susanna. And there we are.
It cost her the election, I think.
It did, because the FBI director at the time, who was a Republican like Trump, reopened the inquiry. And
just before the election.
But it's why some people say, and of course this won't happen, can we trust the Americans with intelligence and in giving them our intelligence?
Because they share a lot of our
Especially as they simply won't admit the gravity of what's happened. I mean, Trump's basically saying nothing to see here. These things happen.
And deriding and dismissing the publication, The Atlantic, and the journalists as sleazy or whatever, pointless. It is amazing that we could see operational plans for American fighters jets.
And isn't it
bomb
interesting
people.
to hear what they talk about in terms of their comments about us and about Europe?
Freeloaders.
And about freeloaders.
It's entirely transactional now.
Yeah.
It's that's all it is. There's no allies, no common interests with democracy.
They seem to hold us in complete contempt.
It's why I think it's pie in the sky, all this stuff. Biden thinking he can do... Sorry, Starmer thinking he can do this great big diplomatic deal with Ukraine and America, because they're not interested.
No, well
they're not interested.
Well, you look at what's happening in the in the Black Sea, where basically Ukraine was doing well against the Russian fleet, sank the flagship, all the vessels have had to be withdrawn. And now Trump's big peace plan is, right, let's have a kind of truce in the Black Sea. Yeah. But the Russians, Putin, is saying, right, we want sanctions lifted on agriculture and fertilisers. We want to be back in the SWIFT global banking system before we agree.
The rate at which prices are rising.
Imagine they'll be cheerful.
Well, yes, apparently we're all feeling better off, according to Kevin. So
yes,
all
right, when they come out, let's compare them with how much wages are going. They're probably not published today, but I'd be very surprised. Wages are going up about a bit over 4%. Yeah. I'd be very surprised if inflation, which was 3% last time, had gone up. Yeah. And it's a cost. Don't like that. I bet you it's not going up as much as wages. OK. No, Kevin, I'm just having
telling people that prices are not going up as fast as their wages is very different from people saying, I don't feel better off, and the cost of living crisis still pinches with my household budget and all my bills going up. You can't just shout at people, you're better off because your wages are going up more than prices.
I'm just introducing a few facts in a bit of balance.
He's been shouting a lot today.
And it's true, emotions are not always how the reality is.
When he's on the defensive, he shouts
and also,
all the time.
I know people say facts
don't... You shout all the time.
There is a lot of shouting on this programme, I will admit. But when people say facts don't care about your feelings, people's feelings don't care about your facts. If you feel worse off, and inflation did reach 11% under the previous government.
Yeah, no, but Susanna, we were discussing the economic situation with the government, and all I was hearing was bang, 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 hammer, hammer, hammer. Nothing getting better. Some things are.
Yeah.
And it is where I think higher NHS spending they're doing, I think is good.
If your waiting list is going down, that's good news.
Yep.
Yes.
So when we talk about those tax rises and national insurance, which will have an impact, that money is going in about 25 billion's worth into the NHS. Yeah. So I think, in fairness, when we're looking at the ledger, we should look at both sides.
All right.
And
debit and credit.
And both sides of the ledger. Those tax rises are going to put tens of thousands of people out of a job.
And here's something that's appearing to get better. The world's media has had a lot of fun talking up the feud, the jam feud, the kitchen feud between Gwyneth Paltrow and Meghan Markle.
I love it.
They have gone onto the front foot.
Yeah.
Have a look at this.
I genuinely do not understand this at all whatsoever. Do you understand this?
Now, that's clever PR.
It is. It's a double win.
Is this your paper's fault, Andrew? Because Daily Mail loves a feud between two high-profile women.
We like to point out what two high-profile women are trying to do to sell their wares.
Shall I just point out, if you don't know what the background to this story is, of course, Meghan Markle has this Netflix series, With Love, Meghan, in which she's in her gorgeous kitchen, except it's not her kitchen. It's somebody else's kitchen, and she cooks all this delicious food.
Well, she sort of half-cooks it. She doesn't really do a lot.
She does cook it.
Ice cubes with fresh flowers in.
Everybody
wants
her
those.
Spaghetti.
She cuts a piece of bread. And
she upbraids her friend Mindy for not knowing what her actual surname is. It's Sussex. Don't you realise my surname is Sussex
Which, of course,
now?
it is.
Did you learn how to make an ice cube? Doesn't she have a little session on that?
There's a lot of dried flowers in it.
it's a tea bag.
And Gwyneth Paltrow, of course, runs Goop, which is a lifestyle brand, and she also spends time in her kitchen, but she wears pyjamas and it is actually her kitchen. So a number of newspapers have said, oh, they're at it. They're pulling each other's hair out. And as Richard points out, the latest video is them companionably sitting in
California
Gwyneth's
besties.
kitchen.
And it's not for me, but it's been a success. There is that second series.
I think
you're not the only person
who's watching.
Yes, and has thought, I quite like, I'll cook that.
Yes.
I know you hate it because you just detest that.
I love the entertainment value. It's fascinating. She becomes ever more ridiculous.
What would you print if it wasn't for Meghan Markle?
Oh, we find something, don't you worry.
There's a two-page spread in The Sun.
Yeah.
Meghan Markle's on a crusade to become a billionaire and secure the jet-set lifestyle she assumed she would have.
I think she thought she'd get that with Harry. Hasn't quite worked out.
But there, from
cynical,
the ethos of that paper is it's great if people are ambitious and aspirational and they want to make a lot of money, but not when it's her.
No, well, we just prefer it if she hadn't been so vile about our royal family.
Can we just talk quickly cats? Are you cat owners, either?
I have Rosie and Minnie.
How old is the cat?
I'm not really sure. Because they were rescue cats and they were never quite sure. They're probably about 13 or 14.
13 or 14?
Yeah.
Mine went to the great cattery in the sky, sadly.
Oh.
Well, it's just that we are expecting, assuming that the cat lives this long, to talk to the owner and hopefully to the cat, which may well be the oldest living cat on the planet.
Yeah, the average age of a domestic cat, 13 to 20 years old.
Yeah, I've had several gone to 20.
But Millie is, we think, well, the owner thinks, is a good 30. Good 30, which is very, very old. That's like more than double the average life expectancy of a pussycat. The problem is that to get into the Guinness Book of Records, you've got to give actual technical proof, which would mean taking Millie's DNA. Taking scrapes off her teeth and stuff, and he doesn't want to do that.
No, too old.
Could you because I suppose a photograph from when the cat was young wouldn't quite work, would it?
Is she in good form, this cat? I mean, is she deaf and blind?
I would stay watching.
Yeah.
After 8, you can see.
I hope he's not going to feed the cat that cake. That won't do it.
It's not deaf and blind. It's not like you, mate.
That's a cake for humans, but she did lick the cream off it, apparently. Oh, and apparently she will only drink bottled Buxton water. Oh. She won't drink tap water. She turns up her whiskers at that.
She wouldn't have lasted long in my house.
Oh, no. So it's a pushy pussy, then. Yeah.
And meanwhile, we are busy baking a celebratory cake for Loose Women, which has won Best Daytime Award at the Royal Television Society Programme Awards.
The lovely Janet.
Huge congratulations. It was for their campaign against domestic violence, domestic abuse, so really important campaign, facing it together. Incredibly emotional acceptance speech yesterday at the RTS. A huge congratulations.
So we're
Great
calling
stuff.
them loose winners.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I like it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, Kevin, Andrew, we will speak to you at 8:45 when we find out whether everyone's feeling better off after we get the inflation figures.
OK, we get those inflation figures.
will be, I'm sure.
About 5 minutes.
I'll come in with a wage increase.
Drinks are on you. Drinks are on you,
Maybe
Kevin.
we can find something different to talk about. She was convicted, not once but twice, for the murder of 21-year-old British student Meredith Kercher. And despite being acquitted and fully exonerated, Amanda Knox still cannot escape the shadows of her past. In January, a judge upheld a slander charge against her for falsely accusing her former boss of the murder.
Well, she spent 4 years behind bars in an Italian jail for Meredith's murder and was dubbed Foxy Knoxy by the media. She's written a new memoir and she describes how this nickname was catnip to the global press, but it didn't describe who she was.
Good morning to you, Amanda. Very early morning for you there, nearly just gone 3 in the morning. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
The obvious danger of writing a book like this one is that you do two things, isn't it? You drag it all up again, which is bound to disturb Meredith's family, and you risk looking as if you're capitalising on your own tragedy. What would you say to those two basic points?
Well, I would say that my first book was a very different one than this book. I think I'm very proud of Waiting to Be Heard. It was written at a time where I felt like so many people were authoring my experience and saying what it was, and I felt like I needed to set the record straight. But it was written at a time where I was very much deeply enmeshed in the legal saga and in proving my innocence. Today, I look at this as an opportunity to share the story of not erasing the past, but really learning from the past so that we can live better lives, and personally and as a society.
And what about Meredith's family, the impact on them?
Well, I hope that they read my book because I really honor Meredith's memory in the book, but I also believe that my story, honoring her past and her story, does not mean erasing my own. And I am a person who is continuing to pursue justice in this case, but a bigger issue that I try to speak to in Free is how do we all overcome the traumas that are in our lives, regardless of whether or not we get what we deserve.
Do you feel, and this is a personal matter for you, do you feel that in writing this book and then publishing this book, you're simply continuing the process of demonisation? Because you know what it's like to be falsely accused of something. There are some people who will never accept that you're innocent. And even though you've written this book, as you say, it's the second one, by talking about it again, by, as I said, dragging it all up again, you risk the pointing fingers from the other side of the street, saying, there she is, she did it.
Well, I mean, I'm not talking a lot about the trial in this case. I'm really talking about what it's like to, after you have been through a very traumatic and overwhelming experience, how do you reintegrate into your life? How do you take what has been imposed upon you that is a very traumatic experience and not let it define you? I really try to take what I have been through and provide universal lessons that I think will make other people feel really seen. I think that what I went through was very catastrophic and very unusual in many ways, but the lessons that I've derived from it are all really personal and universal. I spend a lot of time in this book discussing all the mistakes and misadventures that I had after I came out of prison, when I was technically free, but I was very much not free at all. I was the girl accused of murder, and I had to really sit with that and recognize oh my goodness, my identity is inextricably linked with the death of my friend that I had nothing to do with. Now what? So what? And I think that struggle of trying to find who I am in a world that really wanted me to shut up and disappear because they didn't feel like my life mattered and my perspective mattered was a journey that was really hard. And I think that a lot of people will potentially see themselves in.
You spent almost 4 years in prison and 8 years on trial for Meredith's murder, but you are acquitted and exonerated. There was an individual, Rudy Grady, who was eventually convicted. But you have lost an appeal against a slander conviction. You had a 3-year sentence for wrongly accusing a completely different person. I think it was your boss at the time, a Congolese bar owner called Patrick Lumumba. Why did you accuse him of the murder?
Oh, well, I didn't. So I think that's very important to recognize that the European Court of Human Rights has already recognized that what I went through in my interrogation was absolutely illegal and against my human rights. I was coerced into making statements that I had no intention of making, and I never, ever knowingly and willingly implicated an innocent man. I was tortured into believing that he might have had something to do with the murder, and those were the statements that I signed. But they were ruled out as evidence in this new trial, and I think it's really telling that the Italian court decided to convict me based on a retraction of those statements that I was coerced into signing. I think it's really telling that the Italian justice system is really facing a problem of the cost of recognizing my innocence. I think that there was resistance to acknowledging that I was a young girl who was tortured and betrayed by the police in the immediate aftermath of another young girl being murdered. And I think that there's an unwillingness to recognize fault by the authorities.
But do you have any recourse then in that case?
I don't know yet. I'm waiting for the motivation document. One of the great things about the Italian justice system is all verdicts are motivated. And so I'm waiting to receive that document so I can better understand their reasoning and potentially appeal to the European Court of Human Rights yet again.
So you have not stopped in your fight to clear your name, as you say, in that part of the case? Because that, of course, that conviction upheld still hangs over you. What impact does that have on you?
Oh, my goodness, it's huge. I mean, I don't think that I ever would have been convicted of murder were it not for the fact that I had been accused of slander. I think that putting me in a position of terrifying a 20-year-old girl and denying her human rights until she thought that she was crazy positioned me as someone who was suspect in the public eye, because I think that a lot of people really don't understand what it's like in an interrogation room. And when you are a young person who has already gone through something very traumatizing, like if I had never been accused of murder, I still would be like processing the fact that I came home to discover my friend and roommate murdered in my house, and that it very well could have been me if I hadn't been lucky enough to meet a young man 5 days before. So I think that I was very much suggestible and vulnerable in those moments. But you know what? Like, I look at, like, one of the messages of Free, my search for meaning, is that regardless of all of that, and the fact that there are some people in the world who will always project their negative fantasies onto me, that doesn't define who I am. It doesn't. Like, I've really had to go, like, really combat that sense that I am defined by these boxes that people want to put me in. And I think there's a sense that, like, I would need to disappear or run away from that fact. But in the same way that I've chosen never to change my name because there's nothing wrong with me, I also do not believe that I should hide from my past and the fact that I have gone through this experience. I have learned, and I've worked so hard to learn from it. And now I'm really looking forward to standing on top of that box that people have shoved me in and sharing my message with the world.
We're going to ask you about your friendship with Monica Lewinsky in just a second. But just before that, when you look back, as you yourself say, you were barely out of your teens when this catastrophe, when the roof fell in, basically, on all of you involved in this. I want to ask you this. How much do you think that the media's obsession with your looks at the time, I mean, we mentioned that sobriquet of Foxy Knoxy, which went around and around. The media seemed obsessed with the way that you looked. When you look back, do you think that your appearance at that time was in any way part and parcel of what happened to you? Why you were accused, why you were charged, why the Italian police became so almost obsessed with you as their guilt figure?
Yeah, I think that there is something to that. I was a pretty young girl. Meredith was a pretty young girl. And I think that ultimately, if you really look deep down at what the messaging was, what was being packaged by the prosecution and the media, was this very vicious and horrible myth of a woman-hating woman. That there was this idea that, like, a sexualized woman is constantly in competition with another woman. And I was disgusted not only by how I was misrepresented as this, you know, drug-addled whore, but also how Meredith was misrepresented as this, like, uptight, judgmental person. She was not. We were both young, young girls at the cusp of our life. And it was really unfair how we were both sort of turned into mythological figures that didn't exist and that were not representative of reality.
OK, you have found an unusual ally in Monica Lewinsky, and I believe you're making a film together of the experience that you went through. I just want to put to you something that the family lawyer for the Meredith Kercher family said, Francesco Maresca. It seems the initiatives of Knox continue to be inappropriate and disrespectful towards the memory of Meredith. It's evident that for Knox, the Perugia trial continues to be a source of income and a series of opportunities to maintain her name in the media. Mrs. Knox, after so many years, should respect the silence and memory. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would say that he's a hypocrite, honestly. As someone who has himself profited not just off of the work that he has done on the case, but also on writing his own book, I think that Mr. Maresca can very politely keep his opinions to himself. He has always been very much a man who has never, ever considered my humanity and my experience, and is subject to something that I like to call the single victim fallacy. The idea that in a tragic event, there can only be one victim, and that is simply not true. And so I think that I don't really care what Mr. Maresca thinks,
okay.
to be frank.
And finally, a brief word on Monica Lewinsky, and how did you have that connection?
You know, Monica came into my life very much at a time where I was very, very lost and beaten down. I had spent years, my entire adult life, with people telling me that I didn't matter, that my life didn't matter, that no one would ever believe me. And she was right there at the moment when someone first asked me to tell my story for a group of people. And I was terrified. I didn't know what they were going to think of me. I didn't know what ideas of me they had in their mind. And I very much felt like I was the only place for me in this world was no place. And she came in and showed me from her example that a woman who has been demonized and sexualized does not just disappear, and in fact can use her experience to reframe our understanding of the world, to really examine ourselves both as media creators and media consumers. And she really gave me the courage to uplift my voice in a very similar way that my husband did.
All right. Amanda Knox, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. It's an interesting book, and it's been fascinating talking to you.
Very interesting conversation. Thank you for that. Defence spending is set to receive a £2.2 billion boost in the spring statement, the mini-budget, later today, as the Chancellor vows to make Britain strong again.
But whilst Defence receives that boost, the Chancellor will have to make an extra £500 million worth of cuts to welfare. Defence Secretary John Healey joins us now. Very good morning to you, Mr. Healey. Your mission when you came into government was growth. There is no growth at the moment, apart from, it seems, in the defence budget. And meanwhile, welfare is going to be cut even further because the watchdog says the Chancellor's sums don't add up. Is this what you came into government to do as a Labour man?
Yeah, we came into government recognising the first duty of any government is to secure the country's future, and the Chancellor will set that out this afternoon in the spring statement. She'll say the world is changing. It requires us to increase more investment in defence, so an extra $5 billion in total this year as a bold first step to what will be the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. And this is going to allow us to make the country safer in an insecure world, but it will also mean that we can drive economic growth and boost jobs in every part of the country.
OK, a lot of people watching would say the first mission of a government is to look after its own people, and the welfare budget cuts do not add up, according to the OBR, and therefore it seems you're going to punish more people now by cutting their benefits. Is that looking after our own?
Well, strong national security is the foundation for a secure economy, a stable society. It's the bedrock of our plan for change for the future as well. And on welfare, just as we will see across the board, the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility has a process. They'll set out their figures this afternoon, and the Chancellor, and I can't and won't preempt what she's got to say, will respond to that in the spring statement.
Mr. Healey, how much longer are we going to go on in government and in this country generally pretending that everything's fine in our relationship with America, when the more we learn about what they really think about us over there since Trump took over, possibly before, the worse it seems to get? I mean, this leaked conversation between the top echelons of American government has revealed the hostility they feel. Oh, it's almost personal towards Europe. They're sick of us for being a bunch of freeloaders. Their exchanges drip with contempt. What are we going to do about this?
Well, first of all, I'm Defence Secretary, and the UK's security relationship with the US is uniquely deep and long-standing. And that was the nature of the discussions I had with the Defence Secretary in Washington earlier this month. We do things together that no other nations do. We train together, we fight together, and often our troops die together, and that respect is there. And he, Pete Hegseth, knows this and talks about this from his own service in the American military alongside Brits in Afghanistan.
Talk about it amongst themselves. That's absolutely plain. I mean, for example, you're absolutely right. The bombing missions on the Houthis are something which we take part in. We refuel American aircraft as they fly. No mention of that. There was no exception given to the fact, oh, but the British are OK. The British actually do their bit. We were all tarred with the same brush.
Well, what was behind that exchange is the public challenge that the US has issued to all European nations to step up on support for Ukraine, to step up on defence spending and on European security. And every European nation recognises we must do more. And you've seen other nations raising their defence spending in recent weeks. In particular, you've seen the UK leading the way with the announcement the Prime Minister made last month on what will be the biggest increase in defence spending in the UK since the end of the Cold War, a vindication of the commitment we made at the last election, recognising that the world is changing and that we're entering a new era of threats. My task as Defence Secretary now is to back up and work with the Chancellor to make sure that we bring benefits to all parts of the country, and we will, a boost to British jobs, a boost to British skills, innovation and small businesses.
OK, but just coming back to that leaked, well, I wouldn't even call it a document, that leaked conversation, which took place on unsecured mobile phones, basically, and it was a deeply, deeply secure conversation, which we now all know about. Can we trust the Americans with our secrets? I mean, we do share all sorts of security information with Washington. Can we trust them? Can we be sure that what we say to them won't end up on the front page of the New York Times?
Well, the US are looking into this. It's a matter for them. But in terms of our relationship, intelligence and defence and security with the US, it's the deepest. It remains the closest of any allies. And we do things, we confront things, we meet the challenges that we face in an increasingly insecure world with greater threats. We do things together that no other nations do. Well,
that's a very political response, as I would expect. But you must be concerned not only at the leak and at the risks to future leaks, but at the fact that the President of the United States won't accept that it was a serious breach of security. He's just shrugging it off and saying, basically, it doesn't matter, these things happen. I quote him, these things happen. That's surely causing you deep concern.
Well, its National Security Advisor has taken responsibility for this. They're looking into it. It's a matter for them. What it says to us in the UK is a reminder that we need to be, as we are, hot on our own security, on our communications. And from my point of view as Defence Secretary, I spend most of the day without my phone because I work in locations where I've got to leave my phone outside. So we're very security conscious here, and it may be hard for our friends and family to get used to, but that's the way we work.
I wasn't suggesting that we don't have a problem. It's America that clearly has the problem, and that may become our problem, but we could discuss that all morning. We have no more time. Thank you for your time on the programme so far. Thank you. Now by the GB News presenter and the Mail's Andrew Pearce and the Mirror's Kevin Maguire. Let's talk actually about a story that's been breaking while we've been on air this morning, developing quite a head of steam out there. The University of Sussex has been fined over £500,000 by the higher education regulator for, quote, failing to uphold freedom of speech. Just give you one line on this. The Office for Students, the OFS, has criticised the university's policy statement on transgender and non-binary equality, saying that it could lead staff and students to self-censor. You've been looking at this story. What's going on? That
issue again, which won't go away, an issue which affects such a tiny minority of people. The backdrop to this is the university professor Kathleen Stock, an out-proud gay woman who felt she was driven out of that university because of statements she made about trans women. What did she say? What kind of... Well, she's part of an organisation which is called LGB, which took out the T, which is seen as transphobic. So she's been accused of transphobic statements. Right.
She was a philosophy professor, and it was around gender identity and how much you can change. Now, She claimed she was driven out. She left the university. I know the cases of masked protesters hounding her, which was absolutely horrific. The university says it's the first ruling of its kind. Says they weren't really spoken to. The fine is excessive, but I think what it brings to light, and there's been a lot of cases around the trans issues where people have been winning employment tribunals where they were dismissed for women for questioning trans ideology, but it's where you have free speech. And then your right to offend and protect other people, and it's going to be a constant tension.
And I tell you what, at a time of a very difficult university finances, I can imagine the University of Sussex is going to suffer with that kind of
I think they're going to appeal.
Right, let's talk about something which affects everybody, and that's the cost of living. It's the spring statement today. Enormously good news, do you think, Andrew, for the Chancellor, that inflation, the rising prices, has gone down slightly? Slightly.
She will be relieved at that. It's gone down from 3% to 2.8%.
Which means that prices are still rising,
It does.
but
And if you're
slower.
getting ready to pay your council tax bill, they're going up a minimum 4.95% effectively. Some are going to be 10%. Electric and gas prices are soaring and food prices are still rising. So this is not going to be... It's a small relief for her, but it just shows the cost of living is still the most important issue facing the country in this government.
It's a silver lining
I call it bronze.
Somebody called it actually a silver cloud with a grim lining. It'll buy her about 6 hours before we see the terrible figures. But we were discussing earlier on inflation and earnings. Average earnings are going up 5.9% now, but they had a squeeze that was nearly 20 years when people became worse off. People are now gradually in work, getting better off. Before you say anything, they're going up higher, earnings higher in the private sector than the public sector.
Kevin, you can witter onto all these statistics as much as you like.
You hate facts.
People do not feel better off under this government.
You're a fact-free zone.
No, our viewers are not a fact-free zone.
Thank you.
Diana, lots of us have not had a pay rise for 4 years. Not all businesses can afford to give rises. Wendy says, I work for the NHS. Our wages are only going up 2.35%, so that is less than inflation. Emma on email, my pay rise this year is 3%. My partner's is rising 2.5%, so I don't understand how Labour can keep insisting wages are going up above the rate of inflation.
It's the Office for National Statistics, which also published the inflation figures.
I know, but when you tell...
No, but I'm just saying, I understand why people feel after a long...
small pay rise is actually much bigger. They will reply with facts.
I was making the point... When we were having the discussion earlier, there are two sides to the ledger. People feel worse off because under his lot, they had the longest sustained squeeze in wages.
And massive inflation. We acknowledge that.
11.1.
But
it's now beginning to change. Now, it may end by the end of the year after this spring clean statement from Rachel Reeves today, which is going to be grim.
Statement.
Yeah, well, if growth is down, if expected, growth is only going to be 1% rather than 2%. That is a loss in a £2.5 trillion economy of £25 billion, which is a 18 winter fuel allowance.
When people on about figures, they lose the room.
Very quickly,
you hate
they lose the room.
What did you guys make of the Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey, who was staunchly defending our relationship with America, saying there's no problem, even though we've got these leaks.
Did you not listen to the
saying
leak?
that they hold us in contempt because we're freeloaders. He was peddling the line that everything's fine. It's not, is it? What did you make of that?
No, and he knows it's not.
He's in denial.
He just doesn't want to pour petrol, which is quite expensive these days, on the fire and provoke them more. Of course, he's talking nonsense. It is not. We saw in the leaked messages where they just consider us a bunch of freeloaders. We've seen what they're doing to Ukraine and siding with Putin, and Trump is just off. He's a loose cannon,
and the whole
firing
point
at
is Starmer's flying off to France tomorrow to talk about the coalition of the wedding. They're not interested in America. He should stay here and sort out the wrecked economy.
Andrew, Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, Britain. Back tomorrow from here, from 6 tomorrow. Now it's time to join Lorraine this morning.